Portugal, there's a YouTube show full of fun facts you need to know.
Hola, bon dia, alegria. Munson here with the Good Morning Portugal show. It is a live stream and it's a podcast as well. And even though it says Good Morning Portugal on the top of the screen there, this is actually Good Morning Iberia. And it's going to be a little bit awkward this morning, I think, because, of course, there was the outage earlier on this week. And it all began in Spain. Michael Heron, of course, joined. In fact, I was just talking to Ana Caramujo, Savvy Cat, and she was saying, yeah, a heron was involved. Like a heron got fried on a power line or something, and it plunged the whole of the Iberian Peninsula into darkness. I wonder if there's any truth in the rumors. Let's find out directly from the man himself, Michael Heron, from the other side of the Iberian Peninsula.
Yeah, I'm still a bit sore, mate. I'm getting my 3rd-degree burns tended
I promise you. She said that, and she may have meant a stalk, because obviously we get a lot of stalks on the power lines, and that could cause a problem. But you would think not enough to plunge the whole peninsula into darkness. How was it where you were?
Apologies. Well, I mean, it was a bit strange for me. I'll tell you what happened to me. It's quite funny. So basically, I'm in my apartment, and all the power goes. So naturally, right, first thing you think is it's just something in my apartment or maybe the building, right, at worst, right? So I realized that it couldn't just be my apartment because the breaker was there, everything. I look out the keyhole because I know the geezer who lives opposite me. He's quite a responsible man in the community, right? So I look through the peephole and see him come running out to go down to speak to the porters. I was like, oh, job done. Someone else is dealing with it. I don't have to worry about it. So I'm just reading at home, 20 minutes later, my mum calls me because she's in the north of Spain. She's like, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, why? There's no power in the whole of Spain and Portugal and France. I was like, oh, like it was a real shock.
Yeah.
And she then says, oh, it's a cyber attack, but I've got to go, right? I couldn't speak to him for 10 hours. So I was literally thinking that we were under siege. And I just stayed at home. And then the power came on at about midnight. It was fine. It was all right.
Yeah.
It didn't bother me. I was lucky. But, imagine being on the metro and someone coming up to you and saying, that'd have been terrifying. People on the public transport system or out and about, I think, for us sort of living further out, I wasn't really fussed by it, to be honest. I was quite lucky.
Yes,
but,
and again, I'm talking to Anna this morning and to Gilda last night. Generally speaking, Portuguese people took it in their stride. It was like
Spain
a case.
As well, huh?
Oh, okay.
I was really proud
to
of
find out
There was
about that.
like no crime. People were being like really like. I've got a video I'll send to you of when the lights came back on my street. People were like clapping. It was beautiful, man. It was really nice.
I mean, yes, something great came of it, didn't it? But let's face it. This should never have happened, right? We're talking about advanced nations.
We don't know yet. We don't know what happened. We still don't know.
But whatever the cause, it just should not have happened, should it?
No. I mean, it's never happened. Nothing like this has ever happened before, to my knowledge. I was speaking to people in their 80s. They said they've never seen anything like it.
And that tells you a lot, doesn't it? I mean, that's a shocker when people of that age, you've seen a lot in their lives and much worse things, obviously as well. But this in an advanced nation should not be happening, regardless of the cause. That you would think the setup would be such that it will be impervious to such a monumental breakdown of that kind.
Well, I think I can tell you, I don't want to regurgitate what people can read online, but for anyone who hasn't read anything or much about it, I can give a 30-second breakdown of what people are saying could have happened so far. Yeah. Which is that basically something happened in France, which meant that, so basically the way that the infrastructure in Europe works with energy is that it's very much dependent on the different countries. So Portugal is dependent on Spain, and Spain's dependent on France. And France has purposely orchestrated that so they can sell their energy to other countries in Europe. So they don't have any interconnectors between Spain and other countries, like across the Bay of Biscay or across the Pyrenees. Yeah, so it's you can blame the French if you want to blame anyone, but you can't really blame the. It's all become political now, hasn't it? People are saying, "Oh, is it renewable energy to blame? Is it whatever?" Let's not go down that route. But yeah, you're right. The summary is no one really knows what happened. Yeah. And let's just hope it doesn't happen again. But people came together in a beautiful way, and luckily it was only 12 hours.
Yeah, I agree with all of the above. And it is hilarious that it would appear that the Portuguese do get the opportunity to blame the Spanish, and clearly the Spanish are kicking it. That SH1T is rolling downhill because the Spanish are blaming the French. But you would have thought, wouldn't you, when governments are signing off such infrastructure deals, that someone might have asked the question, so if the power does go out from your country, does that mean our power is going out as well? Because we can't have that. But presumably those sort of questions never got asked. And my beef with this, and it might sound a bit naive, to say this should never happen, like King Canute standing in the face of his dark house that evening. But really, I really don't think this is a situation we should be in. And we've come to a pretty pass to find ourselves in such a vulnerable situation. And I also agree with you. We may never, I don't know if you did say this, but I mean, we don't know yet, but I don't think we're ever going to really know what happened. And that's the nature of these things, isn't it?
Yeah. And I mean, there's all sorts of conspiracy theories we could explore, but probably best not to. But
I've done that extensively on other
okay
uploads this week. So yeah.
But I mean, I think you're right. For me, the takeaway is like just still I think I'm still in shock that it actually happened on that scale as well.
Yes.
I think people are still in shock as well. I think what maybe saved my fear, and perhaps it was the same for other people, is that very quickly they did actually communicate what had happened and said it will be between 8 to 10 hours and the power will be back on. So I think, had it gone on any longer, I think it would have been a lot more chaotic. I think then people would have really started panicking. But I think and I think actually there was criticism of the Spanish Prime Minister for what he did, but I don't think it was that bad. He came on, spoke for 5 minutes, and that was it. He didn't use it as an opportunity to kind of like spiel any other sort of rhetoric or anything. He just said, yeah, this is what's happened. We don't know what it is yet, but we're going to fix it. And they did. Yeah. So, fair play. And I think it is a wake-up call for Portugal. Mm-hmm. I think Portugal has to fight its corner in the EU now, because clearly there is a political issue where Portugal, whether it's a Spanish fault or not, they are reliant on Spain for their electricity. Mm-hmm. And it was proven because Spain got its power on earlier because we were getting electricity from Morocco and France to help us get back quicker, whereas you were relying on us to be switched on before you guys could switch on. So there needs to be serious talk about why France continually blocks interconnectors from Portugal to other parts of Europe. Well, it's because they have nuclear power and they want to shield themselves from clean energy that's being sold from Spain. Yeah, and funny that Spain was just a couple of weeks before totally reliant on renewable energy for a couple of days on the grid and things like that. So anyway, again, conspiracy theories, we won't go into that.
That's also bizarre, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, on the one hand, be dependent on other countries, but only days before in the press crowing about how independent. But both Spain and Portugal have done that in the last few weeks and months, for sure. And then they find themselves in this situation. And yes, one of the other theories was that there was an over-dependence on Spanish supply. 30% was the figure I heard on the Monday morning. When that 30% dropped out, the system within Portugal couldn't cope with that vacuum of power, as it were, if that's not a contradiction. And then its own systems kind of imploded. Going back to your other point as well, that's interesting. You thought the Spanish Prime Minister had handled it pretty well. There was criticism of the government here in terms of a lack of messaging. And interestingly, and possibly not surprisingly, the person who seemed to come out on top was Andre Ventura of Chega, which it's always easy to speak in opposition, isn't it? But he presented a pretty good account of what should have happened, apparently, I'm told.
It's easy in the moment to, it's easy retrospectively to say what should have happened, right? Because you can, they had to move quickly, and I think they handled it all right. I don't think it was, just by my own experience of how people on the street were behaving, everyone seemed very calm. And the politicians on the television that I saw seemed very calm, so they transmitted that calm. And I think it's because they knew it was being dealt with. You can't fake that, right? So I think we knew that. But, we can talk about renewable energy. We can talk about the fact that there may be some teething problems as we transition, because renewable energy is very regulated, how much you can produce. And it's only in the last few years that we're seeing countries being able to solely rely on it for brief periods as they test it. So there could be an infrastructure issue there. I mean, as you said earlier, it just seems incredible that it could go to the scale it did, where literally an entire country, two entire countries lose all their electricity for 10 hours.
Yeah. How does that happen? How does that happen? Maybe there's so much technological advance in one area that the basics got overlooked. You would kind of, given that shouldn't have happened, and then that it did, you would hope that it is something like that, some sort of terrible oversight that can be patched quite quickly. And I think a lot of the infrastructure is ancient and is being held together in the most sort of rudimentary way in places. And I suppose if in this position of being able to ask these questions, we might go back to basics. I'm in favor of more localized. To me, it was a really good demonstration of what happens when you over-centralize and you leave it entirely to commerce. It's the worst case scenario, isn't it, of over-centralization and corporate excess. In a kind of Johari window, as it were. That's the worst quadrant to be in, isn't it? We want to. I think we need it more localized, and we need a better balance of corporate and civic control over the power supply, or governmental control, some sort of hybrid. But maybe I'm going back into the too much into the idealistic. We have people watching, Michael. I think pleased to see us both on the screen.
Bon dia, Sarah.
Sarah, good morning to you, the Yerman family, this side of the Iberian Peninsula. Where are all your people? Bon dia, my son was taking me.
I've been posting, mate. My channel is in the dust.
Oh, we'll come back to that. All right, I'll come back to that. We've got a crisis at Good Morning Espana. But he now is taking me for lunch. So you've got the pleasure of my company. We're so glad, Andero. Ian is in your country. Bon dia, Carl. Michael, Miguel, from an overcast San Sebastian. Hope all is well. You've been to San Sebastian, Michael?
I haven't, but see, there's someone from Spain already. I'm just kidding.
Right. He's one of ours, though.
I know he is.
Bon dia from Dougie. Yeah. Gets a bit territorial when Michael's on. We had our nieces and family here from Lisbon. We went out for lunch at a restaurant, and I think that's what a lot of people did. Yes, and everything was as normal there. Maybe they had a generator. Fortunately, it was a bright room. Oh, and no lighting, so they didn't have electricity, but they continued to cook on gas, presumably, and told you could come back and pay the bill tomorrow. Well done, the Iberian Peninsula, in so many ways with that sort of thing. Trust. And the show having to go on, basically. Good to have a bit of Munson & Co. first thing in the morning. Nice to see you, Doug. And San Sebastian is Dougie's favourite Spanish Basque city there. Buenos dias, bons compañeros from Fiona and Sam. Thank you for your message last night. And Salamanca. Is that where you are, Doug, this morning? Well, they get about, don't they?
See, there's your audience, mate. They're already moving over.
Is there something I've missed? Did I not get a memo or not read the news? Everyone's gone to Spain suddenly.
Everyone's gone.
Solar panels, coincidentally, a week before we booked those, says Andy there. It is gorgeous. Okay, San Sebastian's a bit bonkers at night. We also liked Santander. Bilbao was too full of tourists and not our vibe, although the Guggenheim and both building and the exhibits were fantastic over there. Have you been over there? Do you know these places?
I've been to Bilbao. I've never been to Santander as well, but I've never been to San Sebastian. Right, but I want to go. Yeah, I want to visit the north. I haven't been really around the north properly.
Right. Apparently there is a Portuguese law to shut down your solar power if there's a power cut. If you're also connected to the grid, unless you know someone, which often people do in Portugal. We had a near miss in the UK, Denmark. They had issues with the Viking interconnector. That doesn't sound so sexy anymore, does it? If it can plunge the UK into darkness. The Viking interconnector is...
That's lovely. That's lovely, isn't it?
You can imagine, can't you, a load of blokes in overalls sort of scratching their heads looking and going, do you know what? We're going to call this the Viking.
Can I just say something about what Sarah's saying here, and she's making a very good point. And it's the same in cities that get regular hurricanes, like Houston will regularly have entire blackouts. So I think maybe we just not used to it happening ever in Europe. That could be, you know.
Well, it is true, and I'm glad that it hasn't seemed to have upset North Americans too much. It's like, well, we just, we're used to this sort of thing happening. The point for us is we're really not. We've had to get used to in a UK continent comparison. I don't think supply is as good as I remember it being in the UK. So you'll get outages to do with the weather and infrastructure problems, and they're usually back on, aren't they? If not in seconds or minutes, then only a few hours. Have some experience of that in Portugal, but not this whole country thing. We're really not used to that, Sarah, and that's a bizarre thing for us. And I think our aspiration should be to stay connected. It's not like we're short of technology or ideas, is it? That could have that happen. It's just the political and corporate will isn't there to have that happen, it would appear.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm fascinated to see what happens in the next couple of weeks, whether the media narrative just dies down, or we actually find out more information, or it'll probably just peter out. But there is definitely going to be a huge debate in the EU with regards to France and its monopoly over electricity in Europe, because that's a fact. Like, Portugal should not be dependent on Spain, just like Spain should not be dependent on France, and both countries should be able to sell their electricity and receive it to whoever they want. So that's a huge problem. Just hope that gets fixed. And
is it true that EDP is Chinese owned anyway?
But that's half of Portugal, mate. Half of Portugal's been owned by the Chinese for years. It has.
Nice little dig.
No, but I mean, there's plenty of companies owned by Chinese in Spain as well. It's not, but a lot of the Portuguese companies that are private are owned by foreign shareholders, or remember like the big scandal with Isabel dos Santos, because she owned half of Portugal's companies, and then obviously the Luanda leaks happened. So there are some companies in Portugal that would surprise you who they're owned by. But all that information is publicly available if they're public.
Yes, companies. I mean that's what's fascinating. We know this, don't we? And I think I have a beef with this idea that the White House says, or China owns. It's not China, is it? It's not. When buildings or countries get named as the at the beginning of a sentence,
it's the nationality of the investor or company, right, or the location. It's not.
Yes, that's right. What we're talking about is extremely wealthy individuals from these countries who really you could say have the stake and the power in these things, and that's a very interesting conversation to have. And I think they tend to hide behind the national identity as though it's some sort of big geopolitical issue, when in fact it's just a few individuals. I suspect a few wealthy individuals, and that's another rich and interesting theme that we could go into another time. I'd like to know what's going on with Good Morning Espana then. So how's life in Spain? And what's
mate, to be honest, it's just been because I've just been so busy, and I know this is a poor excuse, but just sorting out my visa, and I had my children staying with me for a couple of weeks. So it's just been all sort of big. Yeah, it's been great, but it's just been a bit chaotic. So I think hopefully from next week I'm going to try and do. Well, actually, I was going to do a live show on Monday. Thank God I didn't. Right, but I was actually going to do the first live stream on Monday.
All about timing. It's all about timing.
Great timing, right? So soon, mate. Hopefully soon.
Well, you know where we are, and there are many people who will support you from this side of the Iberian Peninsula. You let us know when you are going live, and we'll make sure we support you.
Thank you.
There's a request here. I don't know if you owe Gary some money, but he wants to know how he can contact you.
You give him my WhatsApp, mate. Give him my WhatsApp.
Okay. All right. So for anyone who is interested in watching your broadcast, subscribing to you, I can do that. I can connect them up with you on WhatsApp. Fantastic. Yeah. I think he probably wants a bit of bi-berian action for the new show that he's doing on a Wednesday evening. There's going to be a huge debate at the Benção dos Capacetes. I don't know, what is that? Is that the blessing of the helmets?
Yeah.
Is it? Yeah. Why would there be a huge debate about the power outage? I'm not sure.
No idea.
I think as well as the blessing of the helmet, anything else that we can get blessed at this time, it is useful to do so. Any other big Spanish news? I mean, this has dominated the news agenda. But what was bubbling under? What was going on your side of the peninsula before Monday's big outage?
It was quite a slow news week, to be honest, mate. I'm just trying to think. I feel like we've had the last week. We've had enough news to last us like a whole year.
Yes, it's true.
Right? So I'm just trying to think what was on the agenda before. Well, I mean, bizarrely, they were talking about this before. They were talking about, Spain has for long had this got highlighted during the start of the Ukraine-Russia conflict. That Spain had an energy crisis and it was dependent on energy from other countries. And Portugal's gas comes from Nigeria. So when energy prices went up, the Portuguese actually had a much better situation than the Spanish. So they were talking about renewables, and I think the Spanish energy minister actually made a point about France having a monopoly on the energy in Europe and blocking countries like Spain and Portugal the days before. But obviously it doesn't get the media coverage because no one's really talking about it. So now that this event's happened, people look back and see it in the news. So yeah, I couldn't really tell you, mate, what we were talking about before that. This has obviously dominated the news for the last week. And
it's indicative of the times we live in as well, isn't it? Because we can't remember what last week's news was. I mean, there was a time when you could probably remember that, and the stories would stick around for days, if not weeks on end. And Bryan Adams would be #1 in the charts for 3 years. We live in very different times.
Was it 14 weeks? Was it 14?
I don't know. Or Mull of Kintyre. It's like, that was a sign of how slow things seem to move compared to how they move now. And you made a very interesting point. It's like it might just fizzle out, and we'll be on to the next thing, won't we? What's next in the big world news agenda? And I don't think we will find out what happened on Monday, because we'll have moved on to something else, and it's just this constant churn and stir, isn't there, of things to keep excited or distracted, you might argue.
I hope not, because it's such a big story, and it'll be one of these stories that becomes an anecdote in the future. But right now, I think it is a huge story. It'll be the story of the year.
Where were you? Where were you on the 28th?
I trust the journalists. I think the journalists won't let it go. I don't think the media will let it go. I think people will want answers, and that it'll be fascinating to see how that is dealt with. We will get some kind of answer, but it will probably, like you said, we won't ever know if it's the truth anyway.
Yeah. Okay. And I want to come back to a point you made about Spain being independent. Just want to say hi to Jackie this morning. Bon dia, Carl Gumpers.
Morning, Jackie.
Lush morning here on the canal. Had a great fun day at the Aveiro Uni Finalista Parada and party yesterday. Daughter just finished her master's in physics. Well, send our congratulations to her. That's fantastic news. What's she going to do as a master's in physics? The world is her oyster by the sound of it there on data. And Denise, good morning to you. Lovely to see you, Denise. Belated birthday greetings to you. Good morning, Carl. And I'll extend that to you, Michael, as well this morning. He's on the other side of the peninsula, where I think you mentioned en passant there that Spain can be independent in energy. Is that right, technically?
No. So this is no, and Spain can't. So this is the big issue with renewable energy, that it's not only is it highly regulated, but it's regulated how much you can produce and what to do with the excess. And if you're not able to sell it, then you have to kind of absorb it. So this becomes a problem. So yeah, Spain relies on France, and Portugal relies on Spain. But obviously, when there's a shortage, Spain can get its electricity from France or from Morocco, whereas Portugal has to wait for Spain. There's no Portuguese connection between Portugal and any other country in Europe. It's all for its electricity. It's all through Spain.
But we are. I mean, sorry, I misunderstood you then. Spain doesn't sound like it's energy independent. As I say we, I mean, Portugal and the energy PR seems to suggest that Portugal can be independent. Maybe that's dependent on environmental conditions to power solar and wind. But you would think if you could be, you would be. And we hear this thing that used to be talked about in the oil business is like, well, the UK could be oil independent, but for geopolitical reasons, it trades with the rest of the world. Do we not? Is it not time to rethink that? I mean, in terms of what's good for the people.
Next time we're going down that road with you, mate. That's too much. Okay, no. I mean, we have an economy that is reliant on oil, right? So you can't just remove that. So yeah, I mean, the irony is that Portugal and Spain could probably quite feasibly power itself using renewables. And Portugal more so than Spain.
Yeah.
And Spain's not far behind. But yeah, that's unfortunately looks like a long way from happening. But who knows, mate? As you said, we will probably never know. I hope we get answers.
Conversation worth having, though. I would have thought, if we can be independent and we can be localized and independent, that would be a great thing for people who you imagine governments are meant to serve. But maybe again, I'm being a bit too idealistic.
Yeah, Elon Musk a while ago, he'd come up with a solar panel kit that you can buy and have at home. It costs €2,000, and it uses solar batteries, and it's not connected to the grid, so you'd never have to pay for electricity ever again. And that product has disappeared. It's very difficult for him to sell that because all
who was that?
Elon Musk.
Oh, okay. So, all right. Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. That's also very interesting, isn't it? Because I suppose anyone talking about energy independence would soon be, I think, in some way linked to the far right agenda of, you want to be independent. You don't want to work with other countries in the world. So jingoistic, semi-fascistic. Yeah, we're not falling for your right-wing energy independence agenda there, you fascist. Interesting times. Let's keep talking about that. We can change the subject in just a minute. And we've got a nice light finish as well of somebody, I think, in a shopping trolley covered in soap suds. Bon dia. Spend roughly 15K, says Rui, good to see you, who I think is in blackout mode on YouTube there. And you'll be laughing when countries go dark next time. You'll make sure your money back, you'll make your money back, use the grid as your backup, not your main source. And there are some questions to be asked about whether you connect to the grid or not, because some people, although they were technically independent, when they were connected to the grid, they couldn't use their own system because the grid was down. Or some places it might be made illegal.
You're always connected to the grid, I think, even if you have your own solar. So that's why this Elon Musk product was so interesting, because you would be independent from the grid. It's like a DIY kit that runs itself. And you just need these batteries, but it's been blocked. So we'll find.
Bring it on, I say. Bring it on. I mean, maybe it needs to look like it's coming from someone else, because or probably the oil companies need to be the ones to do it. That's probably what will need to happen, which I'd be all for if it gets fixed. So that's an interesting thought as well, isn't it? That yes, they might shift at the last minute to something that they can sell because they can't sell oil anymore. Very interesting, very cynical, possibly as well. According to the Progress Playbook, I wonder what that is. Portugal's electricity mix in 2024: hydro at 28%, wind at 27%, imports from Spain 20%, solar 10%, fossil fuels 10%, and biomass 6%. Biomass is a good local solution, we heard as well.
And wind as well. I mean, that's the easiest one. Because the problem with solar is you need a lot of land, because it takes up a lot of space, but obviously wind is ideal. But anyway, that's a conversation for another time.
It is, and always an awkward one, but we're not afraid of going there sometimes. Excellent, Andero. The Masters in Physics is looking at inventing batteries and new ways of storing electricity. Marvellous. Love to talk to her on the show at some point. Energy independent, moving to Portugal. My biggest fear is relying on the grid for power. I'm probably going to go off grid with my house when I find the right one. Good luck with that. Perhaps a final question then this morning, and we've got a lovely video to finish with. This is what was in the news a few months ago that I forgot about. Gary reminding us, what are your views on the media promoting stories of tourists and immigrants becoming unwelcome in certain parts of Spain? Any truth or complete rubbish?
Well, do you know what? There was a really nice story. I can't remember which northern Spanish town it was, but there were two immigrants that had saved a local's life. I think it was a homosexual man who was getting beaten up by locals outside a nightclub, and these two guys intervened, and they were illegal immigrants, but the town gave them citizenship for what they did for the community. Cool. So so that was a positive story. And to be honest, Gary, I think like anything, mate, the media will feed you whatever they want to feed you, depending on what their agenda is at that specific time and whether the news is slow or not. I would say what's happening in Madrid now is maybe what started to happen in Lisbon sort of 5 years ago, where locals start to get a little bit resentful towards tourists when it becomes too much.
Yes.
And when housing prices go up. But I would say that Madrid is starting to lose its local charm a little bit, because there's so much tourism now, which is what happened to Lisbon. But it's still and I would say it's become more inclusive than when I lived here 10 years ago. So I would say, from my experience, I haven't heard of tourists or immigrants being unwelcome. There's obviously nuances to it. Depends which part of the country. I mean, Spain has always been a very regionalized country.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to look at each region independently and sort of dissect it. But I would say Madrid, generally speaking, is quite good with
That's your perspective in your place, isn't it?
But
I
that's
think what
just
he's
my
referring
perspective.
to is how in the parts of Spain that are colonized by the Brits, it was becoming more hostile in
Yeah,
terms
maybe.
of taxation and ownership. And then the Barcelona thing, I think, where tourists were being sprayed with water pistols as a show of, you know, sort of outrage and frustration from locals. And it's like the wrong target in a way, isn't it? It's
You
like
know, I don't know if you thought this, mate. Did you watch any of the UK news coverage of the blackout?
no, I didn't. I'd be very
So
interested
I
to see
did,
that.
right? And it was crazy. It was like
I bet.
chaos.
Yes.
You know, they use all these words for clickbait. It's like, it wasn't that bad. Like, it was bad,
It
but not that
wasn't.
bad. It
Yeah.
wasn't that bad. And like they say, you know, Portugal and Spain plunged into darkness. You know, these adverbs they use.
We could write this.
Never
We
heard
could
the word
write this
plunge
stuff.
before, you know, in years. So you just got to be careful with what news you read these days, right? And that's been the case forever. But yeah, I was very sort of offended at seeing that, because comparing it to what the Spanish were saying, and then they just kept on showing the same images of the same traffic over and over again from Sky News. You know?
Yeah, I can imagine. It's like there's not enough horns and hooters and people screaming on that. Could you add some sound effects on top of it? It's not quite dramatic enough. Exactly. Fantastic. Okay, mate. Well, keep on keeping on over there. We're here at your service and in support. If you spark up a live stream, we'll get as many.
I will, mate. I'll let you know. I'm going to do it. I promise. Before the end of May, I will have done my first live stream.
Good
and
on
I'll
you.
get you on. All right.
You take care. Sounds like things
too,
are going nicely for you in Spain. Last word then from that side of the Iberian Peninsula. You've got anything for us before you go?
Just really happy to doing this collab with you once a month, and you know, long may it continue.
All right,
and
mate.
Big respect.
Bon fin semana to you. What's that in Spanish?
Bon fin semana, amigo. Ciao, ciao.
All right. See you, mate. Bye for now. Ciao, ciao. We're going to go out with a lovely video from Andy. Thanks for joining us for the live stream. Don't forget to subscribe. And thanks to everybody who took us over 3,000 subscribers. Bon fin semana.